The Truth About Goblins. Chapter 7. I think you're overreacting. Overreacting? Really? Annie groaned. I can't remember anything. At all. Doesn't that seem weird to you? Kit shrugged. I don't know. Magic can be finicky sometimes. Why don't you ask Imagic what happened? You think I didn't try? She sighed. I could barely talk to him. It was like... He stared, waiting for her to finish. Like what? Ugh, never mind. She turned away from him, jumping off the stage and onto the main floor of the club. He followed, making a clumsy descent. I'm just saying, all we saw was a bunch of wind and light and stuff, like a storm, almost, except it was inside. He laughed. Sure freaked out the audience, though. I think you toppled some tables. It wasn't me, she said sullenly. I had no idea what was going on. She paused. At least, I don't think I did. Maybe you're tired, he said, slipping past her on his way to the back of the club. The crowd had gone, but the mess of chairs and tables still covered the floor. Maybe tomorrow you'll remember it. She was doubtful, but offered no reply, trying her best to avoid the spilled drinks on the ground and the chairs in her path. She slid her hand over a table and frowned. What's this? Kit stopped. He glanced at the table, his eyes scanning the symbol branded onto its surface. A big ol' apple chopped in half. I know what it is, she said irritably. But why is it on the table? She looked around, realizing that every table had the same symbol. Why is it all over the place? Yawning, he brushed her question aside. Coffee first. She looked away from the tables and focused her gaze ahead. She must have tired Kit out with all her questions. She would just have to wait. Another moment of silence, and Annie realized that she was tired too. Eyeing a couch in the far corner of the club, she gave another sigh, eager for a chance to relax. The Ace of Clubs hadn't been closed for long, but most of the staff had already gone home for the night. A handful of performers were the only ones remaining, along with a few VIP members lounging about the bar. Kit took a seat beside Annie on the couch, reaching for a cup of coffee from a nearby tray. But one sip and he spit it back out. She laughed. What's wrong? Is the coffee too yucky for you? It always smells better than it tastes, he grumbled. Why do I keep forgetting? Annie relaxed in her seat, watching as the others took their places in the makeshift lounge. Some had coffee, some had drinks, and others were simply enjoying the quiet atmosphere of the abandoned club. It seemed that this get-together was part of some routine. Each performer had their usual spot in the circle. She noticed, however, that Imagic wasn't present. But no one bothered to point out his absence, a languid silence stealing over the company. The feverish hours of the early morning had all but ebbed away, fading into the part of the night reserved for more intimate conversation. It was a peaceful end to such a hectic evening. Telekinetic, the last to appear, took advantage of a vacant armchair and sat down. But what a show it was, he said, already reminiscing. Goblins will be talking about this one for weeks to come. We all outdid ourselves tonight, agreed Yin, sitting cross-legged on the floor. She nudged her brother next to her. Yang and I did exceptionally well, if I do say so myself. He offered nothing in reply, staring at the floor. Ignoring his silence, Yin continued. I can imagine the old theater struggling to sell tickets for quite some time. The old theater, growled Telekinetic. I'm surprised they haven't thrown in the towel. They should have guessed by now that they're not welcome. They've been here longer than the Ace of Clubs, said a woman by the couch. Annie recognized her from the orchestra, a violinist with short red hair named Sakura. I heard the building used to be a brothel a few years back. It doesn't matter to me when they arrived here, I only want to know when they'll be leaving, came his cynical reply. The old theater draws humans to the market like flies to the dung. They come down every night and clog up these streets for no good reason. Annie, though her senses were dulled by her drowsiness, found the sudden turn of conversation to be strangely hostile. Her curiosity piqued. She made a quick scan of the group and realized that Jackie wasn't around. Neither were any other humans. Don't you start the old human-hating rant, warned Yin. Remember, they buy at least half our tickets. It's not the humans I hate, grumbled Telekinetic. It's the fact that they get to come down here on a rampage, feed off our own dirt like a horde of greedy moles, and then return to the surface while they rest up for their next invasion. Moles don't eat dirt, said Kit. Worms eat dirt. That's not the point. Telekinetic slammed his fist on the table. The point is that as soon as we want to go up and enjoy the sunlight, those meddlers slap on another rule or regulation to keep us goblins on a leash. He rolled his eyes. No magic above ground, no gold coins above ground, no weapons, no local goods, there's even clothing restrictions. I mean, this is discrimination we're talking about. Yeah, said Sakura. Pipe down there, Kinetic. You get so righteous when you're tired. Let's change the subject. She poked Annie, sitting half asleep on the couch. How about you, kiddo? Did you like the show? Annie, aware of the sudden spotlight, tried to shake off her sleepiness. Yeah, it was great. But she quickly realized her answer didn't satisfy. I mean, incredible. I've never seen anything like it. Telekinetic snickered. Yeah, I bet you haven't. What was it like, I wonder, being up there with Imagic? The mention of his name quieted everyone in the circle. The sudden silence only made Annie more nervous. It was different, she said, hesitant to answer under everyone's gaze. It almost seemed as if they were afraid to speak too. This is all kind of new to me. Oblivious to the tension, Telekinetic continued to pry. It was new to everyone. Never thought I'd see someone else touch his precious pearl. He doesn't let anyone come within arm's length of it, usually. There was a wry smile on his face. He seemed to be enjoying her obvious discomfort. He must think you're pretty special. He had pushed her too far with that last remark. Her timidity swiftly changed to annoyance. I wouldn't know. What's your point? This time Kit was the one who snickered, the smile fading from Telekinetic's face. Clearly irritated, he opened his mouth to say something more, but stopped as a firm hand clapped down on his shoulder. Leave her be, said Imagic, appearing from nowhere. You're giving a nasty first impression, Mr. Wilson. Telekinetic's fire cooled under Imagic's icy gaze, though his narrowed eyes betrayed his frustration. It was another short moment before Imagic pulled away, retreating to his place at the edge of the circle. Everyone was watching him, that same calm falling over the group once again. No one spoke, but whether it was from respect for Imagic or some sort of enchantment, Annie couldn't say. She only watched as he shut his eyes and released a heavy sigh. He seemed tired, something she hadn't noticed before. There were dark circles beneath his eyes. Sakura was the one to break the silence. You were stunning tonight, she said timidly. Thank you, he answered, his eyes still closed. It is the aim of he who headlines to surpass the rest on his appointed evening. Where have you been? Said Mikhail, the lead guitarist. Didn't catch you at supper, did we? At last, he opened his eyes. I was taking the time to practice. Practice? Exclaimed Telekinetic. We just finished the show. You're not working on your next act already, are you? Don't you have 2 weeks before you're headlining again? Imagic's gaze jumped around the circle of faces. 1. That's rough, remarked Kit. Can't you just do the same trick over again or something? It'll be a different audience anyway. I must continue my work, he said stubbornly. There is no true challenge without the constraint of time. You might want to take it slow, suggested Yin, concerned. You keep going on like this and you're sure to tire yourself out. Yang opened his mouth, about to speak, but a look from Imagic and he was silenced. I cannot rest, he continued. Further still I must advance, deeper into the realm of magic and all its rewards, as well as its pains. There was a time when goblins lived lifetimes upon lifetimes, but now, in all my misfortune, it appears I am only given one. A shadow fell over his eyes. There is no time for rest. You've already achieved so much, exclaimed Sakura. You're the greatest magician I've ever seen. Imagic said nothing more, but leaned back in his seat and closed his eyes a second time. Despite his proud words, the physical exertion of his shows was taking its toll. Annie watched as another silent sigh left his lips. His magic came at a heavy price. She's right, said Mikhail. You're not looking so good. He shuffled through a bag at his feet and produced a small vial, glowing green under the faint light. Why don't you give this stuff a shot? It's supposed to be an energy booster or something. Does the job. He reached across the circle and held it out to him. A little gnarly for me, though. Opening his eyes, Imagic reached to take the vial. What is it? Like I said, energy. Just put a drop in your drink and it'll send you blasting when you need to hit the gas. But don't take it too close to bed or you'll never fall asleep. Keeps your heart pounding. Imagic turned the vial over in his hand. This looks interesting. Where did you get it? Cousin got it for me last week when I was playing at the Poison Apple during my break here at Lavinia's. Mikhail shook his head and laughed. What a punk. Wouldn't have made it without that stuff. But where did your cousin get it? Asked Kit, suddenly curious. Stuff like that could really come in handy. You know that big tower past downtown? Said Mikhail. It used to belong to some rich sorceress, but she upped and left after things got hot with the meddlers. Right now it belongs to some weird magician who trades some pretty freaky stuff, if you've got what he's looking for. Oh, I think I've heard of him, said Yin. Rumpelstiltskin, if I'm not mistaken. Yep, that's the guy. What? Exclaimed Telekinetic, nearly knocking over his coffee. You don't mean the real Rumpelstiltskin, do you? Yeah, genius, replied Mikhail, sarcasm dripping from his voice. I mean the real Rumpelstiltskin. He rolled his eyes. Smarten up, you dolt. Imagic shifted in his seat at the change of subject. If Rumpelstiltskin was in town, he would not so easily betray his presence. How come there's a magician with his name, then? Grumbled Telekinetic. Rumpelstiltskin, thought Annie. The name was familiar, but she didn't feel as though the Rumpelstiltskin she was thinking of was the magician they were discussing. Not wanting to sound ignorant, she remained silent. Apparently he can make gold from anything, said Yin. Oh, I get it, said Kit, like the fairy tale. He glanced at Annie and decided to save her the embarrassment of asking. Rumpelstiltskin is a famous goblin magician, he explained. He was so powerful that people say he cheated death 1,000 times and that he still lives today. Her curiosity getting the best of her, Annie ventured a question. But he was some imp that spun straw into gold, wasn't he? And then there was that bit about guessing his name. Was he actually a goblin?
That he is, said Imajik. The greatest goblin magician of all time. What little you've heard is merely a weak interpretation of the tale, and that tale merely one of many.
But that story is hundreds of years old, she exclaimed. Wouldn't he be dead by now?
Dead? Rumpelstiltskin.
Imajik lowered his gaze, shaking his head as he chuckled.
Such naivete, as if death could take him. Verily, I say to you, the laws of nature could hardly thwart such a goblin.
Heard he could turn invisible, said Meow. Shapeshifts too, apparently. That's bogus, scoffed Kit. Ain't no magician that could turn into a bird and fly away. Not on his own, said Yin. He would need help, from a wizard or something along those lines.
You don't know what you're talking about, said Telekinetic. Wizards don't associate with our kind.
Very well, she said irritably. A magician, then, or sorcerer. She paused and smiled as her brother whispered something in her ear. Of course, there's a story all about that. Haven't you heard the tale of the 7 goblins?
Who hasn't?
Said Sakura, bored by the conversation. It's this Rumpelstiltskin I want to hear more about. The real one, mind you. There's been a lot of talk about him lately.
Last rumor I heard was a few months ago, about that market collapsing overseas, said Meow. Meddlers say it was the old rump behind it all. Ah, that's nothing, said Telekinetic. I got something even better.
He leaned forward in his seat, excitement written all over his face.
I recently heard he had his eye on this very market. Talk of the town says he's rustling up all the transgressors he can find, preparing for...
He was interrupted by a deep, throaty chuckle. Everyone turned to Imajik, head bowed as he laughed in his seat.
Truly, Wilson, you aim to entertain. Your humor edges on the verge of lunacy. Do I sound like I'm joking? He said, furious. I would have thought you, of all people, would want to be enlightened. Enlightened.
Another chuckle.
Such a strange word to use for a string of whimsical rumors. Perhaps you should focus on collecting facts rather than idle gossip.
Telekinetic held his ground.
Why? He sneered. You haven't got anything to hide, do you? Besides...
He sat back in his chair and gave a big yawn.
We're all on the same side, aren't we? I mean, if Rumpelstiltskin, the real guy, was recruiting around this area, I'd be the first to sign up.
Kit must have been using his crystal, because he sensed Annie's agitation and turned to look at her. Transgressors, she thought, aware that he was listening. These guys are terrorists? He gave her a look that indicated there would be an explanation later on. For now, it seemed best to say nothing. Imajik rose from his seat, the mirth from his features fading as he pulled his hood back over his head. He passed by Telekinetic and placed a hand on his shoulder a second time.
You have 2 ears, my friend, and 1 mouth. Listen as you were meant to listen, but keep quiet about what you hear.
With that cryptic piece of advice, he strode away from the group, off to practice his magic.
Said Telekinetic. Someone's grumpy.
Well, it is getting late, said Yin. It's almost 8, for goodness sake. Come, Yang, we have to go. She stood and helped her brother to his feet. Until tomorrow, everyone. A moment later, and they were out of sight.
You better pack it up too, Jack,
said Mikhail, eyeing his companion on the couch. Annie had fallen asleep.
Oh? Oh, yeah.
Kit turned his attention back to her, somewhat amused.
Remember, she's from above ground. You know they don't sleep during the day.
She will now, said Sakura. Try not to scare her off, all right? She actually seems half decent.
Don't count on it,
said Telekinetic, getting to his feet.
She's too smart to stick around Jack for much longer. Keep your crap for someone who cares,
muttered Kit, gently shaking Annie's shoulder.
Hey, kid, we gotta get going.
She turned her head away and moaned.
If you don't get up now, I can carry you home.
I'm up, she groaned, ignoring his outstretched hand. I can do it. I'm fine. Let's go. Kit laughed and wrapped his arm around her shoulders. Oddly enough, she didn't try to shake it off. After a hasty round of goodbyes, the two left the club together, sleepily heading back to their small apartment on Main Street.
Hey, hi, I'm your narrator, Miranda Eastwood, also the author of The Truth About Goblins. If you liked this chapter, remember to add, follow, or subscribe to this channel so you can hear the next one. And if you didn't like this chapter, oh well, I can't really do anything about that. In any case, I just thought I'd let you know about my Patreon. You can check it out if you'd like to throw some support my way. It would mean a lot to me. Not to mention there's loads of extra exclusive content that I only post on Patreon. While I'm at it, I'll mention that The Truth About Goblins is now available as a complete audiobook, and you can get it wherever you get your audiobooks. Thanks for listening.